The mocking proposal. The Grand Hall of the Interstellar Council was a place of breathtaking scale and daunting decorum. Marble-like floors shimmered under an ethereal light source, reflecting intricate mosaics of the known galaxies. Each civilization had a seat at the vast oval table, their representatives watching the proceedings with keen interest. For Captain Adrian Hayes, Earth's first diplomat to this assembly, the pressure was palpable. Beside him stood Lieutenant Marcus Trent, his closest friend and a strategic adviser. Marcus, a stoic and calculating individual, had been Adrian's partner through countless military and diplomatic missions. Together, they'd maneuvered through some of Earth's most critical moments, though neither had encountered anything like the Interstellar Council. "Relax, Adrian," Marcus muttered, keeping his voice low. "You're representing humanity, not delivering a eulogy." "Easier said than done," Adrian replied, adjusting the collar of his ceremonial uniform. "I can feel their eyes judging every move." Their exchange was interrupted by the arrival of the Torva delegation. The Torvans were imposing beings, tall, with obsidian-like skin that shimmered faintly under the council's light. At their head was King Thalax, his aura commanding absolute silence as he approached. Clad in an ornate robe, he walked with deliberate arrogance, the kind that came from wielding power without opposition. "Humans," Thalax said, his voice a low rumble that echoed across the hall. "A species so young, so untested. Yet here you stand, seeking alliances among civilizations far your senior. Fascinating." Adrian stepped forward, maintaining eye contact. "Humanity seeks peace and cooperation, not patronization. We've proven ourselves through perseverance." Thalax's lips curled into a mocking smile. "Perseverance? A quaint term. Very well, let us discuss this. Alliance." He gestured for his entourage to step aside, revealing a young woman behind him. She was striking, though not in the conventional sense. Slender to the point of fragility, her pale blue complexion contrasted with the darker hues of her kin. Her silver hair fell in waves around her face, and her piercing violet eyes darted nervously across the room. Her expression was one of quiet defiance, despite her evident unease. "This is my daughter, Princess Lyra," Thalax announced, his tone dripping with disdain. "I offer her to you as a gesture of goodwill, a symbol of our willingness to humor your endeavors." The hall erupted in murmurs. Adrian's brow furrowed as he glanced at Marcus, who leaned in to whisper, "This feels like a trap." Ignoring his friend's caution, Adrian addressed Thalax. "You mock us with this offer. What's your angle?" "No angle," Thalax replied smoothly. "She is of little use to me. Fragile, weak, and—" he paused for effect, his gaze narrowing. "Broken." Lyra's fists clenched at the word, but she said nothing. Adrian studied her for a moment, then turned back to Thalax. "If this is meant to insult us, you've miscalculated. Humanity doesn't discard its own, no matter their perceived weaknesses. I'll accept your offer, but not as a gesture of goodwill. Consider it an opportunity to prove we are more than you think." Thalax raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting this response. "Very well. She is yours to command. Do with her as you see fit." The formalities concluded, and the council moved on to other matters. Adrian and Marcus remained seated, their thoughts spinning. "Well, you've done it now," Marcus said, breaking the silence. "What do you plan to do with her?" "Help her, if she'll let me," Adrian replied. "She's not what her father says she is. I can see it in her eyes." Later, in their quarters aboard the Earth delegation's ship, Adrian and Marcus prepared to meet Lyra. The princess had been escorted by a contingent of Torvan guards, who departed after leaving her at the ship's entrance. She stood in the middle of the room, her posture rigid and her expression guarded. Adrian stepped forward, offering a small, reassuring smile. "Princess Lyra, welcome aboard. I'm Captain Adrian Hayes, and this is Lieutenant Marcus Trent." She said nothing, her gaze flickering between them. Marcus crossed his arms, his voice skeptical but calm. "We're here to work with you, not against you. Whatever your father's intentions, we're not part of his games." Lyra finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. "You accepted me. Why?" "Because no one deserves to be treated as you were," Adrian replied. "Whatever your father thinks, I believe you have more to offer than he realizes." Her expression wavered, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through her guarded demeanor. "You're wrong," she said quietly. "I have nothing to offer. That's why he gave me away." "Then we'll prove him wrong together," Adrian said firmly. "You're not alone anymore." Marcus sighed, muttering under his breath, always the optimist. But there was no malice in his tone, only a grudging respect for Adrian's determination. Lyra's lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't need your pity." "This isn't pity," Adrian replied. "It's a chance to show the galaxy who you really are." For the first time, Lyra's eyes met his directly. There was doubt, but also a glimmer of something else, hope. She didn't respond, but Adrian took her silence as a step forward. Marcus broke the tension with a practical suggestion. "We should start with a basic tour of the ship. If she's staying here, she'll need to know how everything works." Adrian nodded. "Good idea. Princess, shall we?" Lyra hesitated, then nodded slowly. As they walked through the corridors, Adrian and Marcus explained the ship systems and its crew. Lyra listened intently, her initial wariness giving way to curiosity. By the time they returned to their quarters, the atmosphere had shifted. Though still reserved, Lyra seemed more at ease. Adrian felt a spark of hope for the alliance they were trying to build, not just between their civilizations, but between individuals learning to trust each other. Chapter 2. The Princess of Shadows. The Earth delegation's ship, Odyssey, hummed quietly as it drifted through the vastness of space. Adrian Hayes and Marcus Trent stood in the command center, reviewing the latest reports from Earth. Their attention, however, was divided. Both were acutely aware of the Torvan princess residing in the guest quarters. Marcus broke the silence. "She hasn't left her room since we brought her on board. Not exactly a team player, is she?" Adrian rubbed his temples. "Can you blame her? Her own father practically sold her off, and now she's stuck with us. We need to find a way to get through to her." Marcus shrugged. "You're the diplomat. I just keep you alive." Adrian gave a wry smile. "Then come with me. She might feel less cornered if there's someone else there." Together, they headed toward Lyra's quarters. Adrian knocked softly on the door, which slid open to reveal the princess seated near the window. She was gazing out into the void, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "We're not here to intrude," Adrian began gently. "But you've been in here for hours. We thought it'd be good to talk." Lyra didn't turn to face them. "And if I prefer silence?" Marcus crossed his arms. "Silence won't help you understand where you are or who you're with. We're trying to make this work, Princess." Finally, she glanced at them, her violet eyes guarded. "Why? You don't owe me anything. I'm just a burden you didn't ask for." "You're not a burden," Adrian said, stepping further into the room. "You're part of this crew now, and that means we look out for each other." Lyra studied him for a long moment before sighing. "Fine. What do you want to talk about?" Minutes later, they were seated at a small table in the common area. Marcus had brought coffee for himself and Adrian, while Lyra sipped cautiously at a glass of water. The tension in the air was thick. "What do you think of the ship so far?" Adrian asked, breaking the silence. "It's different," Lyra replied hesitantly. "Torvan ships are darker, more austere." Marcus chuckled. "We're not exactly a luxury cruise either, but we like to keep things a little more welcoming." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "Welcoming? You're trying to forge an alliance with my people, yet you don't trust us." Adrian leaned forward. "Trust isn't automatic. It's earned. That's true for both sides." Her gaze dropped to the table. "And yet you trust me, after everything my father said." Adrian exchanged a glance with Marcus, who shrugged as if to say, "Your move." Adrian took a deep breath. "I trust what I see in you, not what he wants me to believe." Lyra frowned. "And what do you see?" "A person who's been underestimated for far too long," Adrian replied. "But you don't have to prove anything to me. Show yourself who you really are." Marcus snorted. Always the motivational speaker. "What he's saying is, you've got skills we probably don't know about. Why not show us what you're capable of?" Lyra hesitated, then gave a small nod. "What would you have me do?" The next morning, Adrian and Marcus led Lyra to the engineering bay. The room buzzed with activity, as crew members worked on maintaining the ship's systems. Adrian gestured toward the consoles. "Let's start simple. Do you know anything about engineering?" Lyra approached one of the stations, her fingers brushing across the interface. "Torvan technology is more advanced, but the principles seem similar." "What are you trying to achieve?" "We've been having issues with the energy distribution grid," Marcus explained. "Too much strain on certain sectors during high-energy maneuvers." Lyra tilted her head, studying the display. After a moment, she began typing commands into the console. The crew watched in surprise as she navigated the system with ease, isolating the problem and proposing a solution. "You're rerouting the flow," one of the engineers said, impressed. "But how did you?" Lyra glanced at Adrian, almost as if seeking permission to explain. He nodded encouragingly. "My father didn't allow me to participate in council matters," she said quietly. "But I was always curious about our ships. I spent years studying their systems in secret." Adrian smiled. "It seems those years paid off." Marcus clapped her on the shoulder, a gesture that made her flinch at first. "Not bad, Princess. You might actually make yourself useful here." For the first time, a faint smile tugged at Lyra's lips. "Don't call me that." "Noted," Marcus said, grinning. "What should we call you, then?" "Just Lyra," she replied, her voice firmer now. By the end of the day, Lyra had worked alongside the crew to stabilize the energy grid. The shift in her demeanor was subtle but noticeable. Her posture was less rigid, her words more assured. As they walked back to the common area, Marcus leaned toward Adrian. "She's not what I expected," he admitted. "Smarter than her father gives her credit for." "She just needed a chance," Adrian said. "We all do, sometimes." Lyra, walking slightly ahead of them, paused and turned back. "You're not as unbearable as I thought you'd be," she said, her tone light but sincere. Marcus grinned. "High praise coming from you." Adrian laughed, the sound easing the lingering tension. For the first time since the Torvan King's mocking proposal, he felt like they might actually pull this alliance off, not through treaties or politics, but by working together, one day at a time. Chapter 3. The Revelation. The hum of the Odyssey's engines was soothing, a rhythmic pulse that underscored life aboard the ship. Adrian and Marcus sat in the conference room, poring over reports from the engineering team. Lyra's contributions had not only stabilized the energy grid, but also provided long-term efficiency improvements. Marcus leaned back in his chair, stretching. "I hate to say it, but your gamble with the princess might actually be paying off." Adrian smirked, glancing at his friend. "Admit it, you didn't think she'd make it a week." "I still don't trust her completely," Marcus replied, "but I'll give her credit where it's due." Their conversation was interrupted by the ship-wide alarm. Adrian shot to his feet, and Marcus followed suit. "What now?" Marcus muttered, jogging after Adrian to the command center. The bridge was a hive of activity, officers calling out reports as the main screen displayed a rapidly approaching Torvan vessel. Commander Elise Grant, head of the ship's defense systems, turned to Adrian. "Unidentified Torvan ship, heading straight for us. They're not responding to hails." Adrian frowned. "Are they armed?" "They're running hot," Grant replied, her voice tense. "Weapons systems are active." Marcus muttered a curse under his breath. "Looks like this alliance is off to a great start." Adrian turned to the communications officer. "Send a distress signal to Earth. We're not equipped for a full-scale fight." "Already sent, sir," the officer replied. Just as Adrian was about to issue further orders, the door to the bridge slid open, and Lyra entered, her expression unreadable. She moved with purpose, her violet eyes scanning the room. "What's going on?" she asked. Adrian turned to her. "One of your people is about to attack us. Care to explain?" Lyra approached the main console, her gaze fixed on the ship's trajectory. After a moment, her expression hardened. "That's not one of my father's vessels. It belongs to the Kren faction." Marcus crossed his arms. "Care to explain who they are?" Lyra's tone was clipped. "Extremists. They oppose my father's rule and would do anything to sabotage this alliance. They'll kill us all to send a message." Adrian exchanged a glance with Marcus, who raised an eyebrow. "Well, that's just fantastic. Can we outrun them?" Adrian asked, turning to Grant. "Not without overloading the engines," Grant replied. "And even then, they'd catch up eventually." Lyra stepped forward. "Let me speak to them." Adrian hesitated. "Why would they listen to you?" "They won't," she admitted. "But I can distract them long enough for you to prepare a countermeasure." Marcus frowned. "This sounds like a terrible idea." "It's the only idea we have," Lyra shot back. "Unless you'd rather wait for them to destroy us." Adrian studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You've got 2 minutes. Make them count." Lyra stood at the communications console, her voice steady as she addressed the Kren ship. "This is Princess Lyra of the Torva Dominion. You are in violation of interstellar law. Stand down immediately." There was a pause, then a guttural voice responded. "Lyra, the discarded daughter. What an unexpected surprise." Marcus muttered, "Great, they're chatty." Adrian laughed. "I'll take that as progress." For the first time since joining the Odyssey, Lyra felt something unfamiliar, belonging. She didn't say it aloud, but as she looked at Adrian and Marcus, she knew she wasn't alone anymore. Chapter 5. Trust Beyond Borders. The Odyssey's bridge hummed with activity as Adrian, Marcus, and Lyra reviewed the most recent intelligence reports from the Torva Dominion. The data, sent covertly from one of Adrian's contacts within the Council, detailed a new threat, a rogue Torvan faction plotting to disrupt the fragile alliance. "They call themselves the Drow Consortium," Adrian explained, projecting a hologram of a shadowy Torvan leader. "They've been undermining my father's rule for years," Lyra said, her tone edged with frustration. "They thrive on instability." Marcus leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. So what's the plan? We wait for them to make their move, or do we get ahead of it? Adrian shook his head. We need to confirm the intelligence first. This isn't just about them targeting us. They're planning something much larger. If we can figure out their next move, we can expose them to the Council and shut them down. Lyra stood, her eyes narrowing as she focused on the display. I know someone who might help. A former Torvan strategist. If we can reach him, he might have the information we need. Why would he help us? Marcus asked skeptically. Because he hates the Consortium as much as we do, Lyra replied. He's been in hiding, waiting for a chance to strike back. This could be that chance. Later that day, Adrian, Marcus, and Lyra gathered in the ship's strategy room. The dim lighting and the soft hum of the systems created an air of tension as they prepared for the mission. Lyra pointed to a sector on the holographic star map. He's on Vola, an abandoned Torvan outpost. We'll need to approach carefully. If the Consortium finds out we're there, they'll attack. Marcus leaned over the map, his brow furrowed. Vola's in neutral space, isn't it? We can't rely on any backup if something goes wrong. That's why we keep a low profile, Adrian said. This isn't a fight. We go in, get the intel, and get out. Lyra glanced at him. And if he refuses to help? Then we find another way, Adrian said firmly. But I trust your judgment. If you think he'll talk, we'll give it a shot. Marcus sighed. Great. Another suicidal mission. I can't wait. The Odyssey arrived in orbit around Vola, its sleek frame blending into the shadow of a nearby asteroid. Adrian and Marcus, clad in lightweight tactical gear, joined Lyra in the shuttle bay. The smaller craft would take them down to the planet's surface, where they'd meet Lyra's contact. As they strapped into the shuttle, Marcus couldn't resist a jab. Remind me again why we're trusting a mysterious Torvan hermit. Lyra shot him a sharp look. Because he's our best chance at stopping the Consortium. If you have a better idea, I'm all ears. Marcus smirked. Just trying to lighten the mood. Don't, Adrian said, his tone clipped. We need to stay focused. The shuttle descended through Vola's atmosphere, the once thriving colony now a desolate wasteland. They landed near the ruins of an ancient Torvan temple, its towering spires casting long shadows over the barren terrain. As they exited the shuttle, Adrian surveyed the area. Keep your comms open and stay sharp. Lyra, lead the way. She nodded, moving with purpose through the ruins. Adrian and Marcus flanked her, their weapons at the ready. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the crunch of their boots on the cracked ground. Finally, they reached a small chamber hidden beneath one of the spires. Inside, an older Torvan male emerged from the shadows. His once regal features were lined with age, and his silver hair was tied back in a simple braid. Lyra, he said, his voice tinged with surprise. I didn't think I'd ever see you again. Rundal, Lyra replied, stepping forward. We need your help. The Consortium is planning something big, and we need to know what it is. Rendell's expression darkened. They've grown bold in recent years. But I'm just one man. What do you expect me to do? Tell us what you know, Adrian said, his voice steady. We'll handle the rest. Rendell's sharp eyes assessed the two humans. And who are you to make such promises? Captain Adrian Hayes of the Odyssey, he replied. This is my first officer, Lieutenant Marcus Trent. We're trying to prevent a war. Rendell's gaze shifted to Lyra. You trust these humans? I do, she said firmly. The older Torvan's shoulders sagged slightly. Very well. But what I have may be incomplete. The consortium's leadership is fragmented, but their goal is clear: to destabilize the Council. If they succeed, your alliance, and any hope for peace, will collapse. Marcus grumbled. Great. Just what we needed. Adrian shot him a look before turning back to Randall. What's their next move? They've been stockpiling weapons in the Garlus system, Randall said. If you can disrupt their supply lines, you'll weaken their position. Adrian nodded. Thank you. This could make all the difference. Randall placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder. Be careful. The consortium won't let this stand. She gave a small, grateful smile. I'll be careful. You should too. As they made their way back to the shuttle, Marcus sighed. Well, that was easier than I expected. Now comes the hard part. Adrian glanced at Lyra. He trusts you. That's a good sign. Lyra's expression was thoughtful. He knows what's at stake. We all do. The shuttle lifted off, carrying them back to the Odyssey and into the uncertain future. But for the first time, Adrian felt a spark of hope that together they could face whatever came next. Chapter 6. The Unity Accord. The Odyssey was bustling with activity as the crew prepared to address the latest intelligence from Rendal. The stakes were higher than ever. If the consortium's weapons caches were as extensive as reported, their ability to disrupt the fragile alliance was all but assured. Adrian, Marcus, and Lyra gathered in the strategy room once again, this time flanked by Commander Elise Grant and Lieutenant Jonah Voss, the ship's intelligence officer. Adrian stood at the head of the table, pointing to the holographic display that outlined the Garlus system. This is where they're stockpiling. If we can locate and neutralize those caches, we'll cripple their operations. Lyra leaned forward, her arms crossed. The consortium won't give them up without a fight. Their presence here is likely heavily fortified. We're not planning to fight, Marcus interjected. We're going to outsmart them. Grant nodded. We've identified a narrow window of opportunity. Their main supply convoy passes through this sector every 48 hours. If we intercept the convoy, we can trace it back to the weapons depot. Adrian turned to Voss. What's our current intel on the convoy's defenses? They rely on a small escort fleet, mostly outdated fighters, Voss replied. But the depot itself is another story. We're looking at heavy shields, ground-based turrets, and a dedicated guard force. Marcus rubbed his chin. So we follow the convoy, find the depot, and then what? Walk in and ask them nicely to disarm. We'll need to disable their shields long enough to deliver a precise strike, Grant said. That's where Lyra comes in. Lyra blinked, taken aback. Me? Adrian nodded. Your abilities can disrupt their systems. If you can create a momentary power surge, we can take out their shield generators without a full-scale assault. Lyra's gaze dropped to the table. I'm not sure I can control it. Marcus stepped closer. You've been practicing. You did it on the bridge. You can do it again. Besides, Adrian added, we'll be right there with you. After a long pause, Lyra looked up. All right, let's do it. Hours later, the Odyssey exited slipspace just outside the Garlus system's outer rim. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, preparing the ship's stealth systems and running final checks. Adrian, Marcus, and Lyra gathered in the bridge's observation alcove, where the convoy's projected route was displayed on a secondary screen. "Is it a contact?" Adrian asked. Grant's voice came over the comms. 15 minutes. Marcus adjusted his gear. Just enough time for us to get ready. Adrian turned to Lyra. You okay? She hesitated, then nodded. As ready as I'll ever be. Good, Adrian said. Remember, we're not asking you to take on the whole depot. Just give us an opening. The rest is on us. Lyra managed a faint smile. I'll try not to disappoint. The convoy appeared exactly on schedule, their ships gliding into view on the main screen. The Odyssey followed at a careful distance, using its advanced cloaking systems to remain undetected. Voss relayed information from the sensors, pinpointing the lead freighter's coordinates. They're heading straight for the depot, Voss said. Just as we expected. Maintain pursuit, Adrian ordered. Let them lead us in. The crew worked in near silence, tension thick in the air. As the depot came into range, it was clear the intelligence had been accurate. A massive structure loomed on the surface of a barren moon, its shields glowing faintly against the dark backdrop of space. Lyra stepped closer to the command console, her hands gripping the edge. Adrian stood beside her, his voice calm. You know what to do. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. The air seemed to shift as she concentrated, her presence radiating a faint, almost imperceptible energy. The bridge lights dimmed slightly, a testament to the power she was channeling. Suddenly, a series of alarms blared. Grant's voice cut through the noise. They've detected us. They're locking onto our position. Marcus jumped to his feet. Lyra, now would be a great time to work your magic. Lyra's eyes snapped open, glowing faintly violet. A pulse of energy rippled through the ship, and the shield generators on the depot flickered. The glow surrounding the depot faded just as the Odyssey fired a precisely calibrated strike. The shields collapsed, leaving the facility exposed. Direct hit, Grant reported. The shields are down. Adrian placed a steadying hand on Lyra's shoulder. You did it. She swayed slightly, exhaustion clear on her face. It's not over yet. Marcus clapped her on the back, grinning. You're tougher than you look, Princess. Lyra shot him a glare. What did I tell you about calling me that? Right, Marcus said, smirking. You're just Lyra. Adrian cut in. We still need to destroy those stockpiles. Grant, prepare the strike team. Yes, sir, Grant replied. Deploying now. As the strike team launched their assault, Adrian and Marcus remained on the bridge, monitoring the mission's progress. Lyra sat nearby, regaining her strength. Despite her exhaustion, she kept a watchful eye on the screen. Any sign of reinforcements? Adrian asked Voss. None yet, Voss replied. If we move quickly, we can finish this before they can react. Marcus leaned closer to Adrian. It's going almost too smoothly. Something doesn't feel right. You're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, Adrian said. Let's focus on the task at hand. The strike team's reports came in steadily, confirming the destruction of the weapons caches. As the last cache went up in flames, the Odyssey prepared to retreat. Mission accomplished, Grant reported. We're clear to leave. Adrian looked at Lyra, who was watching the screen intently. You did good today. She met his gaze, her expression thoughtful. We all did. Marcus chuckled. You're learning. Maybe you'll start giving us credit more often. Adrian shook his head, a small smile playing at his lips. Let's get out of here before the consortium realizes what just happened. The Odyssey slipped into the darkness, leaving the shattered depot behind. The mission was over, but the fight for lasting peace had just begun. Chapter 7. A New Dawn. The Odyssey drifted through the stillness of deep space. Inside, the atmosphere was lighter than it had been in weeks. The success against the consortium's depot had given the crew a much-needed boost. But Adrian knew the battle was far from over. If the alliance was to hold, they needed more than a military victory. They needed trust, cooperation, and understanding. Adrian sat in the conference room with Marcus and Lyra, a set of data streams displayed on the central table. Lyra stared at the swirling Torvan characters, her gaze distant. "We've destabilized the consortium's supply chain," Marcus said, stretching in his chair. "But that doesn't mean they're out of the fight. They'll regroup." Adrian nodded. "True, but this gives us an opening. If we can reach out to moderate Torvan factions, we might find allies willing to stand against them." Lyra's voice was soft, but firm. "There aren't many moderates left. My father's reign crushed most dissent, and the consortium did the rest." Marcus leaned forward. "You're saying it's hopeless?" "No," she replied. "But we'll have to move carefully. Most Torvans won't openly defy the consortium. They'll need to see proof that humans and Torvans can work together." Adrian looked at Lyra, then at Marcus. "She's right. This isn't just about military strength. It's about showing them what's possible." A few hours later, Adrian and Marcus stood in the hangar bay, overseeing preparations for a diplomatic mission to a neutral Torvan colony. Lyra was there too, her posture tense as she watched the crew load supplies onto a shuttle. "You nervous?" Marcus asked her. Lyra gave him a sharp look. "I've been in more dangerous situations." "I didn't mean it like that," Marcus said, his tone more sincere. "I just know what it's like to walk into a room where everyone doubts you." She relaxed slightly, then nodded. "I'm not nervous about the meeting. I'm nervous about whether it'll matter. These are the same people who've ignored my father's tyranny for decades." Adrian approached, clipboard in hand. "Change doesn't happen overnight. But if they see you standing beside us, working with us, it could start something. Even small shifts in perception can lead to bigger changes." Lyra glanced at him, her expression softening. "You always sound so certain." Marcus smirked. "It's one of his more annoying traits." Adrian chuckled. "I'd call it confidence." "More like stubborn optimism," Lyra muttered, though there was a faint smile on her lips. The shuttle descended through the thin atmosphere of the Torvan colony world. Its capital, a sprawling city of crystalline towers, glittered in the pale sunlight. The settlement was neutral ground, unaffiliated with either the Dominion or the Consortium. It was here that Adrian hoped to build the first real bridge between their civilizations. As they exited the shuttle, a delegation of Torvan leaders greeted them. Their expressions ranged from guarded to openly skeptical. Adrian extended a hand in greeting, but the Torvan spokesman ignored it. "We are not here to make friends," the spokesman said coldly. "What is it you want, human?" Adrian kept his tone calm and measured. "We want the same thing you do, stability and peace. The consortium threatens that, not just for humans, but for all Torvans." The spokesman glanced at Lyra. "And what does the princess have to say?" Lyra stepped forward. "I say that my father's ways have failed. The consortium's ways will fail too. Humanity may be new to the galactic stage, but they've shown me something different, something worth fighting for." A murmur went through the Torvan delegation. The spokesman's expression softened, though only slightly. "You speak boldly, Princess, but words are not enough." Adrian nodded. "Then let's show you. We've already disrupted the consortium's supply chain. With your support, we can dismantle their operations completely." "Support?" the spokesman scoffed. "What makes you think we would risk our lives for this alliance?" Marcus stepped in, his voice steady. "Because the consortium isn't just targeting us. Once they're done with humans, they'll come after you. They thrive on division. Unity is their greatest threat. The spokesman's gaze lingered on Marcus, then shifted back to Lyra. You are asking us to choose sides. That is no small request. We're not asking you to fight our battles, Lyra said. We're asking you to stand with us, to show the galaxy that humans and Torvans can be allies. The spokesman remained silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. Very well. I will present your case to our council, but I make no promises. As they returned to the shuttle, Marcus glanced at Adrian. Think they'll go for it? It's a start, Adrian said, and sometimes that's all you need. Lyra sat quietly in her seat, staring out at the crystalline city as it faded into the distance. Adrian noticed the thoughtful look on her face. Penny for your thoughts, he asked. I'm just wondering if this will be enough, she said softly. If my people can ever see humans as more than just another threat. Adrian gave her a reassuring smile. Change takes time. But you've already done more than anyone else could have. Marcus leaned back, his arms crossed. If you keep talking like that, she's going to start thinking you're charming. Lyra rolled her eyes. That would be the day. Adrian chuckled. You two could argue all day, couldn't you? Probably, Marcus said with a grin. The shuttle's engines hummed as it ascended, carrying them back to the Odyssey. Despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, Adrian felt a small glimmer of optimism. Together they were making progress, one step at a time. Chapter 8. Strength in Harmony. The Odyssey was alive with activity. Crew members hustled through corridors, running final checks and calibrations. Adrian and Marcus stood together in the command center, scanning the latest intelligence reports from the neutral Torvan colony. The news was both promising and urgent. They've agreed to support our efforts, Adrian said, tapping the data display. It's not a full commitment, but it's enough to put pressure on the consortium. Marcus crossed his arms, nodding thoughtfully. This doesn't mean they'll fight, though. What happens if the consortium retaliates? We have to show them that they're not alone, Adrian replied. If we can secure a few more alliances, the consortium's position will weaken enough that even their supporters will start to question them. Lyra entered the room, her steps purposeful. She'd become more confident over the past weeks, no longer hesitating to join strategic discussions. Our time might be shorter than we thought, she said. I just received a message from Rendal. The consortium knows about our meeting with the colony leaders. They're sending a fleet to scare them into backing down. Adrian frowned. How long do we have? Maybe a few hours, Lyra said. Rendal managed to delay them by feeding false coordinates, but that won't hold for long. Marcus tilted his head. Looks like we'll have to deal with them directly. In the ship's briefing room, Adrian and Marcus outlined a quick-strike plan with Lyra and Commander Grant. The crew gathered, listening intently as Adrian explained the situation. The consortium thinks they can intimidate the colony into submission, Adrian said. If we intercept their fleet before they reach the system, we can stop them without dragging the colony into a full-blown conflict. Grant stepped forward. We'll need precise timing and coordination. This won't be a prolonged engagement. We hit fast, disable their lead ship, and force a retreat. Once they realize they can't win, they'll pull back. Marcus chimed in. And if they don't, then we keep them occupied long enough for the colony's leaders to finalize their agreement with us, Adrian replied. This isn't about destroying their fleet. It's about showing the colony that we can protect them. Lyra's voice was steady. I'll be ready to disrupt their systems if needed. I can create enough confusion to give us the upper hand. Adrian nodded, meeting her gaze. It's risky, but if we stay focused and work together, we can pull this off. The Odyssey emerged from slipspace just as the consortium fleet appeared on the horizon. Adrian stood at the bridge's main console, Marcus and Grant at his side. Lyra remained in the observation alcove, her concentration focused as she prepared to use her unique abilities. Consortium ships closing in, Grant reported. They're maintaining formation, weapons systems fully charged. Marcus smirked. They look ready for a fight. We're not giving them one, Adrian said. Prepare the EMP torpedoes. Target their lead ship's navigation systems. Lyra, we'll need you to time your disruption with the EMP impact. Once their formation breaks, we can disable their flagship and force a retreat. Lyra nodded. Understood. The crew moved with precision, the tension thick in the air. Adrian issued the order. Fire EMP torpedoes. The ship trembled slightly as the torpedoes launched, streaking toward the lead consortium vessel. As they approached, Lyra closed her eyes, a faint violet glow surrounding her. The lights on the bridge flickered briefly as she extended her focus. EMP detonation in 3, 2, 1, Grant counted. The torpedoes struck, and the consortium's lead ship shuddered. Its lights dimmed, and the fleet's formation wavered. Lyra's energy pulse hit at the same time, causing further confusion. The smaller ships faltered, their movements disorganized. They're breaking formation, Marcus reported. Their flagship systems are down. Looks like they weren't ready for that. Adrian's voice was calm but firm. Grant, move us into position. Target their engines and weapon systems, but avoid critical damage. We want them to retreat, not to escalate. As the Odyssey moved into position, the consortium fleet struggled to regroup. One by one, their ships began to power down, retreating from the confrontation. They're pulling back, Grant confirmed. Their flagship just sent a recall order. Adrian let out a breath. Stand down weapons. Stay on high alert in case they change their minds, but for now, we've done what we came to do. After the battle, the crew gathered in the common area. The atmosphere was lighter, even celebratory. Marcus sat with Adrian and Lyra at a corner table, a faint smile on his face. Well, that went better than expected, Marcus said, raising a cup of coffee. No one's dead, and we actually made some progress. Lyra gave a small nod. The colony leaders just sent confirmation. They're finalizing the agreement. They see now that we're willing to stand with them. Adrian leaned back, his expression thoughtful. It's a start. We'll need more allies, but this was a big step. Marcus grinned. And you, Lyra, you were impressive. That disruption trick of yours really threw them off. Lyra gave him a sideways glance. Don't get used to me doing all the heavy lifting. Adrian chuckled. We're all in this together. No one's carrying this alone. For the first time in a long while, the room was filled with a sense of accomplishment. Though the path ahead was still uncertain, they had proven that unity, however fragile, was possible. They had begun to forge something stronger than fear and division, trust.